Thank you, everybody, for joining the Bassfug Podcast. Today, we have a very special guest from Los Angeles, California, La Homie, Joseph, a.k.a. Joe. Thank you for coming on the show, Joe.
Thank you for the invite. It's a really big honor to be here.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Well, thank you. Joe, let's talk about the pandemic. How is that affecting your music right now?
Well, actually, it hasn't really affected my day-to-day because, as producers, we like to stay inside and just write beats pretty much all day and all night. So in terms of like day-to-day kind of activities, it hasn't really changed. It's just more like when I wanted to go out, I could, but now I can't. So it's more like you're kind of stuck in your room and just trying to be productive and trying to make better music.
Yeah, were you able to play live before, or you haven't played live yet?
No, I've played a couple shows in LA. I think the last show that I played, I opened up for this artist called Killsmith at Catch One, and that was really dope. That was a really sick opportunity. I'm still like kind of new to LA. I moved here about 2 years ago because I went to Icon Collective. I got into that school in 2019, and that kind of just like pushed me to be a better producer and everything. So just kind of like COVID kind of just smashed all of the plans that were gonna happen after I graduated.
Hmm.
So it's been hard to do kind of like live shows and stuff since.
When you move to new places, do you find it's hard to network? I guess you said you were an Icon Collective. Would that must have helped, but I think when people move to new cities, it's kind of hard to you're new. What do you do, right?
Yeah, no, it's definitely frightening. Definitely puts kind of like an edge on your shoulder because you're not sure how to interact with the new environment, with this new scene of music heads, especially in LA, where kind of like this is where a lot of the big moves happen for artists who
Yeah,
come out here.
yeah,
But I think you just kind of have to keep your goals in mind and just understand that like you're out here for a reason, and in order to get to those achievements, you have to put yourself in uncomfortable situations and learn how to like adapt and become, I guess, like a more sociable human being.
yeah. And like you mentioned earlier, it's a lot of electronic musicians. They don't tend to be the most social. We're locked in our
Right.
bedrooms with our machines. What are the challenges? What did you do? Did you just like go out to every show and try to talk to people, or how did you find ways to sort of, I guess, assimilate?
Well, a lot of it was actually just like going out to shows with the new friends that I met at school because we had like similarities in the kind of music that we wanted to produce and the kind of events that we wanted to play. So we would show up to a lot of events that were of like artists that we really appreciated. And
Hmm.
can I swear on the
Oh, you
podcast?
can say whatever you want.
Okay. Yeah, no, it was just like we wanted to go support like the artists that we fucked with, and like yeah, we just kind of just went. Didn't really care about like who was there or like who else would show up. It's just more like, okay, we're there to learn from these artists, to kind of get an understanding of like how their live shows are set up, the kind of music that they play, who are they influenced by, just things like that.
Did your style change when you got there? Were you producing, I guess, different types of music as opposed to where you were before?
Definitely, most definitely. I would say that my production journey kind of started in 2019, which is when I graduated. Sorry, 2009, which is when I graduated high school. And it's been like 8 years to the point where like I was kind of writing the same beats over and over again. And it was more in the style of kind of like R&B, kind of hip hop influence kind of beats.
Mm.
And I've always wanted to make like heavier kind of electronic like music, but I just like I didn't feel like I had kind of like the foundations to be able to make music like that until I went to Icon, and that's when I kind of like learned a lot about synthesis, a lot about song arrangements, and yeah, that really pushed me to become better.
That's awesome. Let's talk about 2009 when you started making music. Previous to you making music, did you have any type of musical background? Did you play piano when you were a kid? Did you listen to like a lot of music? Were your parents musical? Anything like that?
Yeah, so my mom actually went to college to be a professional like a cellist,
Okay.
like concert cellist. And so from a very young age, she kind of pushed me to do a lot of more of like the artsy things,
Yeah.
like more creative things in life. So I did a lot of like drawings. I did piano. The piano part of my life, though, that probably spanned from when I was like six to 16, and I was playing the piano like pretty competitively, but it had gotten to a point like later on in life where it just wasn't fun anymore, you know? Like sitting at a piano for 7 hours a day, like for 2 months,
What is
like
that
that.
with parents really getting their kids to play piano to the point where they fucking hate it when they're an adult? You're not the first person that I've heard this story. You know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think in the back of my mom's head, she wanted me to at least be good at something, like really good at something. And
Yeah.
so I guess my entire life, like people have told her that I have a quote unquote gift in the piano, but I I just found no joy in it, you know? Like for me,
Mm.
like practicing the piano for like that many hours a day was excruciating,
Yeah.
and it just basically sucked the joy out of it. And so I basically took like 2 years off from like doing anything musical after that, and just kind of lost myself in non-music stuff. And I don't know, like for me, it was just like at the end of the day, I think music was still the only thing I was good at. So that's how I kind of gravitated towards back into music.
Mm.
But I was definitely more interested in the production side of things and understanding that like, oh, okay, even though I know my scales in the piano, I can still translate these ideas over to like a MIDI keyboard and have it sound like horns or like pads or like strings or drums or anything else. I think that really intrigued me and kind of sparked that inspiration to dive into electronic music production.
So we're at 2009 now, and you come back. How did you start, and what did you do? Did you just Google, use YouTube? Did you know a guy that was making electronic music? How did you get into it, and what did you start using?
So I would say the first DAW that I use was GarageBand. And
Okay.
I'm pretty sure for a lot of other people, their first DAW that they use is going to be GarageBand too, because, you know, every Mac laptop comes with it, and its user interface is pretty easy to use, you know? They give you a ton of samples
Yeah.
and they give you a ton of VSTs that you can create individual tracks and then try to stack them up to try to create something that you thought was decent. But clearly in my head, I thought I was way hotter than I should have been. So it was just kind of like me being like, yeah, I can make music. And I made a track for like my senior project. And that was kind of like, so every year, like the seniors in our high school have to present kind of like a project on or a presentation on like a certain topic that they're passionate about. So for me, I was like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna write a song and try to document that entire process. And I was really happy about the song I made at the time. But now, like looking back on it, I was like, what the hell was I thinking when I made that? And
Much
it's
like
still out there
every
somewhere,
much like
somewhere
every high
out on
school
the internet.
memory.
But I just like I'd rather keep that like buried, and I hope that never sees the light of day.
Yeah, I think most people are feel that way about most of their high school memories.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after GarageBand, did you start moving on to something else, or did you stick with GarageBand?
No, 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 no. I kind of upgraded towards Logic, and I was using Logic pretty heavily for about 6 years. but it had also gotten to a point where I felt like a lot of the music that I was creating started to sound the same because I feel like there's only so much that you can do in Logic versus Ableton. Like for me, like now that I'm writing in Ableton, it's a lot easier for me to get my ideas and quicker for me to get my ideas from my head to a DAW. But I felt like in Logic, it was it's very like timeline based. Like the best way I can like explain it is like when you sit down and score like a movie trailer, right? It's like you got to layer all the sounds, but different things come in at different times. It's very linear. But now that I'm on Ableton, it's more like, okay, I can work on this section versus this section, and then maybe flip around the sections to try and see if the arrangement fits better this way or the other way. So it was just like, yeah, just kind of like tweaking my brain to be able to think more creatively and not linearly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think Ableton really allows that, especially compared to, I think Logic is more, I don't say, oh, can you hear me? Sorry. I thought my microphone was down a little bit. Yeah. I don't have a mute button yet, so I move it down so I don't have to less editing. Anyways, what I wanted to say was I totally understand what you're saying. Ableton has, it seems to be easier to move around samples and change song structures than say something with Logic. Logic seems like more kind of a hardcore, like kind of, more academic. I don't know if I could say that, but...
Oh, definitely. I would agree with that.
What are some of the VSTs that you're using? Because I know your sound kind of changes all over the place, but now you're kind of doing sort of hard D&B like neurofunk, and I'm curious what's your synths look like now, and how are you achieving those sounds?
Yeah, so for a lot of my productions, I'm a sample-based producer. So what I like to do is I like to find different samples and then from that sample try to extract either the melodic content, which is usually just converting it into MIDI and then trying to rearrange the MIDI to fit something better, or just taking, say, like a sample of like say I found like a Virtual Riot kind of like bass sound that I liked. I would go into that and then try to add a bunch of stuff on top of it to try to distort the sound or change the sound a little bit more towards something that I would use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so you aren't using like Serum or anything like that?
No, because I've never really been good at kind of like sound design. Like I learned the basics of it at Icon, but at the end of the day it was like,
why?
For me, it's kind of, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. It's like, for me, it's like, I'd rather spend that 3 to 4 hours instead of creating a sound, working on the intent of that sound.
Yeah.
Like, how is that sound going to be used? Like, what is the melodic idea of this section that I'm trying to work on? Yeah. And for me, a lot of it is just trying to lay down a lot of pieces of where I think things should go rhythmically and melodically, and then going back to it later and being like, okay, maybe this sound needs to be changed, and then I go in and tweak the sound to either make it a lot more bassier or either more mid-highs like focused, and yeah.
And also you're able to take it to the next level, like, because where that sound stopped, it took about 4 hours. But then you could take that and start adding more on top of that, like with effects,
exactly,
and start destroying it even more. Yeah, because I notice you have some harder kind of DNB sort of sounds in your latest work, but towards the beginning, it's kind of sadder. Do you agree? You have like more like a melancholy kind of vibe.
Sadder how? Like, you mean more in terms of like an R&B kind of vibe, or
yeah,
more
like kind of more chill. It's you have like Noisia like from your newest stuff, but then you go back and it's kind of it's like more chill, like R&B, like you're saying.
Yeah, I think it was like really important for me to kind of like show this kind of transition of where I was before and where I'm going. So for me, like that first year I started putting out tunes like while I was at Icon. A lot of it was just kind of stuff I was experimenting with, like ideas and kind of like ways that I could blend two different genres to try to come up with something a little bit different. So what I was doing was trying to take a lot of kind of like the R&B kind of style, like Team Supreme kind of future beats, kind of genre, and trying to see if I could put like a heavier spin on it.
Yeah.
And as time progressed, I feel like I've definitely leaned more towards, especially with the stuff that I'm writing now, it's a lot more kind of like I like to call it kind of like mainstream bass music, which is like more poppy. There's a lot more pop elements in it, like more of a kind of more memorable kind of harmony that you can resonate to, versus then it being just kind of like a producer porn kind of just like crazy neuro sound design stuff that you might listen to once at a festival, but you won't really like listen to it again if you're like driving home from work or something, you know.
That's a great term, producer porn. I've never heard that before. I'm writing that down, and I'll make sure to say that again on this podcast. That is a great way to put it. You know, when I was producing a lot in the early 2000s in the MySpace era, the genre we were trying to copy Aphex Twin and Venetian snares, and it stopped being about music so much as it was about just trying to flex on each other, how good we were at sequencing or how good we were at sound design. And it's crazy. It was actually just producer porn, I think, at some point, you know? Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There's still like, I still give a lot of respect to the guys who do dedicate their time to creating one sound, or like creating like you said, like just tweaking around with a, what is that word I'm looking for? Like I have an Ocos, which is kind of like an analog synth that I've been using to do more sound designing kind of sessions. But that shit's really hard to use. And I'm still like trying to learn basically what every knob and button does, but it's still getting to a point where like if I were to come back to it and be like, okay, I'm going to try to recreate this sound that I made 2 nights ago on this little Ocos, it'd be so hard to do, like for me at least. You know, my brain isn't just wired that way.
I find when I have gear, I just try to make noise, especially in the beginning when I didn't really understand like synthesis. I would just hit record on something and I would just turn knobs and just try to get as many sounds. And then after a while, you get familiar with what the map is, you know what I mean? It's like playing a video game, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
But speaking of video game, you're doing a lot of Twitch streaming.
Yeah, that's kind of like a byproduct of this whole pandemic. I wanted to do something kind of a little bit more on the fun side versus just music, you know, because I felt like in the past, I want to say like 6 to 8 years, I was very, very focused on just like being able to write good music. And that's all that mattered to me. And that's all that I wanted, was that. Like, I sacrificed so many nights of like, just instead of going out with friends, I would just stay at home and write beats. Like this last year that I was at Icon, I was writing probably around 25 to 30 demos a month.
Wow.
And then that last week I would go back and select the best ones that I made and then try to actually like finish those tracks. So I had no social life. But I also made it a point not to have one. But also, you know, when quarantine hit, everything stopped, and especially in terms of like doing shows and like trying to get better kind of placements for tracks. Everything just came to a halt. So for me, I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Maybe I'll start Twitch streaming, showing my like productions, playing some video games, and just kind of like growing outside of being so focused on music, which I think has definitely helped, because now it's like teaching me how to find like balance between you know, like separating myself from my work a little bit more, so I'm not too emotionally attached to what I'm creating, so that I can have kind of like a more outside perspective on what is going on and what I'm working on and what I want to do with it.
Yeah, you know, I talk about this all the time on the podcast. It's become a meme, but there's a psychologist, his name's R.D. Lang, and he talks about how a lot of people, they want to experience themselves, so that's why they do work, that's why they do art, you know. And it seems like in the Twitch era, it's like you're almost experiencing who you are. You know, you go back and you watch your streams and you go, oh, I'm that guy, and oh, I talk like this, and you sort of just start refining who you are to be like the better version of what you want to be. And it's almost like a different type of it's like making music, but I guess it's like streaming. I don't know. I don't know what the simile I'm trying to get there is, but do you agree with that?
No, I definitely agree with it. It's been kind of like this process of me, because I remember when I first started Twitch streaming, I was extremely nervous. I was like, I don't know if people are gonna like the way that I talk, the way that I am,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, it's like I am who I am, and I can't really change anything about it, but I can work on becoming better, and that's just kind of like the mentality that I've kept throughout this process.
Do you have any tips for any beginners that are trying to stream, like people that are trying to, get on Twitch? Has the horse left the barn, or can you still get on there and get views?
I mean, I don't mind, like currently I don't mind when I have like one viewer,
Yeah.
because I feel like if I had more viewers, I'd be more pressured to be a certain way or to act a certain way, because
Yeah.
then I have to react to like, say like 20 to like a couple hundred people. It gets a little bit nerve-wracking,
Yeah.
and like I don't know. It's my recommendation is, if you want to start Twitch streaming, I think you should just go and do it
Yeah.
and just worry about the repercussions after,
Yeah.
because whenever you start something new, it's always going to be scary, and
Yeah.
it's always going to be a little bit frightening, but throw yourself in the deep end and you'll figure out eventually that you can swim through it, and how to keep yourself afloat. And yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. When this podcast started, it sounded like a tin can. It was, it was really shitty. But now we're doing really good, and we're in the 4 digits now, and everything's great. And it keeps growing exponentially. And now I upgrade a room and I soundproof it. I get a better microphone, and you just got to jump in and start doing it.
Oh yeah, man, that's fucking awesome.
So I have another question sort of in the same vein. Do you have any tips about online marketing for, I guess, like a new producer who's just kind of getting their stuff out? Do you think they should try to find something like Icon Collective, or do you think they could do it by themselves?
Uh, that's a great question. I would say, at least, well, I can only talk about my experience, but from my experience, I tried to do a lot of the stuff by myself in the early part of my career. And I feel like at the end of the day, a lot of it was like in my head. Like a lot of the achievements that I thought I was hitting was only really making myself feel more comfortable with where I'm at in the industry at that moment. And now, like, getting some of these bigger releases and actually putting in some money for marketing, it's completely different, because now I'm actually a lot prouder of like where my music is being placed. And I work with Michael from Future, and he helps me out with a lot of kind of like the marketing behind my tracks, and he helps me out figure out placements of which labels would be a better fit for my music. And having that guidance has definitely, I guess, like put my mind at ease a lot of the times, because I guess I know that like I'm not alone in this, and that I have people backing me. And I think it's really important to have kind of like a group that that can help you kind of push you towards making bigger and better moves long-term wise for your career.
So it's you got to find a mentor.
Definitely. Either a mentor or someone who can manage you a little bit. I mean, Michael isn't really my manager, but he does manage certain aspects of the La Homie project. And he's definitely my go-to guy. I do pay for his Patreon service, where he essentially charges like anywhere between like 15 to like $50 a month, where you can meet with him and just talk about kind of like your goals, and he helps you kind of figure out like, okay, this is where you are um, in the ladder of the industry, and this is like kind of the route that you need to take in order to make somewhat of a difference in kind of like the surrounding communities to eventually get noticed. And I would say that had definitely helped um, in the last year that I had been working with him. Because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be getting a Bass Rush release. I wouldn't be getting a ton of the releases that I've done currently on this past like 2 years on these SoundCloud labels. And all of that has been kind of steps towards getting to the bigger picture, which is eventually just becoming a touring artist and eventually making money full time off of this passion.
When we're allowed to go to shows again.
Yeah, I hope so, man.
Yeah.
I hope that vaccine is like, well, it's currently being approved by the FDA, right? Or something like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I hear I try to I just, for me, the only thing I want to know is if I could get a PlayStation 5 pre-order slot or not. I don't really follow anything else,
Dude,
yeah,
that's hilarious.
The I noticed something about your artwork. Is that something that is a process that you're a part of, or is that, do you kind of outsource this to just like cool artists? The sting of the scorpion's tail, that is like super dope. That's like a tattoo,
Yeah.
Alphanumerical, it's a cool like vaporwave kind of satellite. You have really cool album art, and and with your new one as well. I'm wondering, is that something that you're a part of the process, or is that something where the label just kind of goes, "Oh, here, use this"?
Well, it's a little bit of both. It usually depends on if I'm doing a self-release. Most of the time, the artwork is handled by me and the graphic artist that I outsource.
Mm-hmm.
But I only really use one graphic artist, and he goes by Edgar GFX. You can find him on Instagram. He basically is my main guy whenever I need to get a certain type of artwork done, because his stuff is just so unique.
Yeah.
There's another graphic artist that I worked with, Inner Sanctum. That's the homie. He helped me actually make my new label, or I mean new logo. Sorry.
Yeah.
That I've been using recently in the past year. But yeah, those are the two guys. Make sure to hit them up. Tell them if you guys need dope, cheap artwork done, like really good quality, but also for a very reasonable price, hit them up. Tell them I sent you, and yeah.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. There's a couple of things I want to ask. Once again, thanks for your time. I totally appreciate it. Let's talk about writing a hit. I notice your songs are pretty good. And talking to you, it sounds like you are putting more emphasis into actually making the song palatable as opposed to maybe going too far under the hood. Can you talk about writing a song and what your, what your process is, as kind of a generic thing to say as that is? Because I look at stuff like Feels Good to Be Dead, and, you have vocals on it. It's kind of like, there's a theme to it. I didn't quite understand it myself, but I wasn't, you could get the vibe, there was something there.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
And I'm just sort of wondering, how you approach songwriting and how any tips for writing a hit.
Well, I don't know if I can give you a tip on writing a hit, because I don't know if I've had any hits yet. But all I can say is my writing process it doesn't usually come from like, okay, I have this melody in my head and I'm trying to like get it out into the project and try to create something around that. It's more like, because I'm a sample-based producer, a lot of it comes from finding a cool sample that I can flip and then hoping that triggers kind of like an epiphany. Like when you make it, you're like, oh, actually, this would sound dope if I did it like this. And then you follow down that route. And then from there, you're like, okay, this is cool, but it's still missing something else. And then you try to figure out what that something else is and try to incorporate to the idea of what you have on your canvas. and then you try to build from that. And then from then, it's just kind of figuring out, okay, this would sound better as like a verse section, or this would sound better as a hook section, or like this could be cool if I went this way for like the bridge. And yeah, I don't know. Like I write a lot of my beats in terms of like you said, more palatable, because I'm always trying to figure out ways like it feels good to be dead. EP is a lot of stuff that like I liked before I started writing heavy bass music.
Mm.
It's like that jazz kind of sound, that boom bappy kind of vibe, and it's a lot of like real instruments, a lot of cool jazzy kind of like riffs that happen. But I'm also taking a lot of the techniques that I've learned in the past 2 years and applying it to those songs.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you think your I guess your piano background sort of gives you an edge in terms of actually being able to I guess write a chorus or a verse that sounds I don't know if this is the right word, but normal, you know, because like if someone just starts and they don't know anything about chords or chord progression or harmonies or anything like that, it might sound fucked, you know?
Right.
So is there anything there that from your years of experience playing piano that you think kind of sped things up in terms of making a song sound like a finished product?
Definitely. I would say knowing music theory, knowing your scales, and especially like when you're writing a song, making sure that every little detail is in the right key is incredibly important. You could have the sickest neuro bass track in the world, but if your snare is tuned to like a different key from the rest of your song, like it could completely throw it off. And you might not even notice that until you like go in and actually like try to change the pitch of your snares, or like if like one sub note doesn't match with the other things that are going on with the rest of your track, like subconsciously you might not know that there's something wrong happening, but you can definitely hear that there's some sort of like dissonance and there's some sort of like clashing that's happening.
How do you check for if your snare is in key?
Well, for me, I do it by ear.
Hmm.
So it's like it's hard for me to like explain. It's weird. Like when you hit a snare, there's that tail at the end where it kind of like echoes out.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like trying to figure out what that pitch is compared to what the pitch is in my song. So usually I'll just like, if my hats are a little bit too mid focused, I pitch it like 3 semitones up to give it a little bit more of like a higher kind of sharper kind of tone to it.
Yeah.
And that usually helps. But just making sure that everything is just kind of in the same key is very, very important.
Yeah. I think a lot of beginners might not know that. And, you know, there's several plugins you could use, and I think Ableton has it built in and stuff. I was just curious how you do it, but you're doing it by ear. I'm not surprised. So let's talk about your new releases.
Yeah. So I'm kind of taking a break from releasing. I haven't released anything in the past 2 months. I was hoping I could release a track in December for my 30th birthday. But after thinking about it, I think I'm just going to not release anything until 2021. I have some big releases coming up. One is on the new Bass Rush compilation, which has been like getting a track on Bass Rush has been a huge goal of mine. And I've been working towards that milestone for the last like 2-3 years. And to finally have it happen, to finally get the contract in and get everything settled was like this kind of moment of where I was just sitting in my room and just being like, I cannot believe that this is happening right now. This is actually insane. Like it's not a life-changing move, but it's a step towards bigger things to come.
Yeah, for sure.
And
totally.
For me, it was like, that was such like validation for me. It was kind of like, okay, these last 10 years of trying to make it in this industry and trying to make something of myself it's it's becoming a reality.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, other than that, I have another track coming out on Unchained, which is my homie's label back in Hong Kong. And they've been doing a lot of like really, really dope drum and bass kind of halftime stuff. And they've been kind of putting that, their stamp on that genre for like China's industry. Yeah.
What
So
what is the industry there like?
I mean, electronic industry.
Well, they have an EDC, right? There's EDC
well, they
China.
have an EDC, but you have to understand that like China's industry is very like it's very much like an ultra music fest.
Okay.
You know, like very generic, very bland kind of bottle popping scene. Which, don't get me wrong, like that makes money, but at the same time, it's like there's not really a lot of growth in terms of supporting underground artists trying to make the music to be played at these shows.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, you know?
Totally.
Yeah. I mean,
but
I don't know. That's kind of like why I left Hong Kong and China scene. It was just kind of I think there's like a stigma when people hear that you're like a music and you're trying to make it. I mean, I'm sure there is a stigma here in the US as well, but especially in Asia, there's not a lot of support when it comes to kind of helping younger artists get where they need to be, and there's no clear path of like, this is kind of like what you need to do. You need to get an X amount of releases on these certain labels, and then you'll get these shows, and these shows will lead to bigger things. And it's not as like structured as how it is here in the US.
Is the culture different? I guess the underground bass music scene, is it like different there, or are they trying to borrow elements from American bass music culture? Because before it was, you know, if there was any electronic music, I kind of take that back. You know, the UK was borrowing things from the United States, and the United States was borrowing stuff from the UK. I wonder if there's elements from the Chinese bass music scene that's borrowing from America, and is there any vice versa?
I think there is. Unchained, especially, their label is focused a lot on UK drum and bass, but they've been kind of opening their eyes towards this US style of West Coast bass music, like Saruda, EPROM, you know, these kind of like guys who are really nasty at synthesis, but also crafting these beats that is a very much like a boom bap kind of beat, you know, and somehow blending that. So I think they are trying to find their way. They are trying to find kind of like their own identity in this scene. But yeah, I agree with you that like a lot of it is like influenced by the UK and by the US.
Joe, thank you so much for your time. I totally appreciate it. Is there anything you want to say before we go? Where can we reach you? What are your socials?
My socials are at Lahomie1990, pretty much on all forms. Twitch.tv/Lahomie1990. You can find me on there when I'm streaming. And you can find me on Apple Music. You can find me on Spotify, pretty much every single DSP. And I really appreciate you for having me on the podcast, man.
Oh, it's our pleasure. You're a very talented producer. My favorites to interview.
Dude,
so,
appreciate that.
Take care, man.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah, bye-bye. That was another episode of the Bassfug Podcast. Totally appreciate that you're listening to this. Hope you're checking out the other ones. You don't want to miss any of the juicy information and cool stories that our guests seem to bring to the table. I'm serious, though. We have some of the best guests. I don't know how I get them, but you're going to want to go check those out. Make sure you're subscribed, because you'll miss all these great stories and music production tips. Check us out at www.bassfug.com. There's links to all of our social media, where the podcast is located, Apple Music, Spotify, you name it. Just go to www.bassfug.com. And thanks for everybody who's been liking and subscribing and commenting so far. It really means a lot. Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.
This program was brought to you by the superwill64.com Entertainment Network. For more great shows, podcasts, and music, please visit superwill64.com.